All right, we're going to talk about shoulder mobility, shoulder extension, and wrist extension for the arm extension push-up. So for the arm extension push-up, you need to come all the way down to your chest, lay on the ground, and extend your arms out to the side, which for a lot of people is a larger motion than the standard push-up where you might be stopping a couple inches from your chest. So you need to make sure you've got good shoulder extension and wrist extension. Normal wrist extension is about 60 to 70 degrees, pulling your wrist back towards your forearm. About 60 to 70 degrees is pretty normal for wrist extension, and for shoulder extension, which is this motion, getting about 50 to 60 degrees is pretty normal. So you need to have good motion so that you're not injuring your your shoulder or your wrist when you're doing the push-ups. So I'm going to show you quickly how to do some drills for those two specific movements. So first, for shoulder extension, you can just use like a dowel. I've got a broomstick handle that I unscrewed the broom, and you can just put that behind your back and just work on lifting your hands away from your back. And you're just gonna do 10 to 20 repetitions. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to really hold a stretch quite yet. You're just loosening up your shoulder. After you do about 10 to 20 of those, you can do a slide up your back. And then lastly, you can do kind of a side-to-side motion where you're pulling your arms coming back behind your body. Okay, and then you can repeat each of those one more time. It doesn't take very long to go through this. Okay, and then up and down. Okay, once you've warmed up your shoulders, then you're just going to stretch into extension. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can just use the dowel or the bar and just hold that stretch. And when you do these stretches, you want to hold for longer durations, 30 seconds to a minute or longer. If you use a dowel, it's going to be a little harder to hold that. You can definitely do it. I like to use like a wall or a piece of furniture that can support you a little bit better so that you can go into a better stretch. So I'm just gonna use this TV stand and put my hands on and just kind of sink down into the stretch and just let the table do the work for me. But you can use a chair or a doorway and just hold on to it and just kind of sink into the stretch. And you're gonna hold it for 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, and then obviously if you don't have anything or you just want to do a real quick stretch, if you're at work or something, you can just do a traditional pec stretch. Just like that. All right, so that's real basic, real simple, doesn't take very long. Shoulder extension. Wrist extension, first thing that you can do is just kind of warm up your wrist. Just do a little bit of wrist rotations. Just kind of get it warmed up. If you feel like you have a lot of restrictions in your forearm wrist flexors, the muscles on the front of your arm that attach to the inside of your elbow, you can do like some rolling or something with the ball, like some trigger point release. You can kind of use whatever you have laying around the house, like an old baseball or other kind of firm ball that you just kind of roll along the muscles to try to loosen them up. You don't have to spend a ton of time doing that. Maybe a minute or two just to loosen things up. And then you can stretch after you do that. So a couple good stretches, just a stretch like this. And you can also do a stretch like this, or you can stretch at a wall in a similar way. Okay. And then a mobilization to work on the capsule. If you feel like you're getting pinching at your wrist, especially on this side, if you're getting pinching, if you don't feel like it's as much of a issue with the muscle, if you feel like you're getting more of a pinch, you can do a mobilization at your wrist. So when our joints move on each other, there's accessory motions. There's sliding and gliding of the joints. It's not just like a roll of the bones on the other bones. They slide and glide. And so we're gonna do a little bit of a slide. And to do that, you can use a belt or a strap and just wrap that around your wrist, where the ends of the radius and ulna come down. And just hold the end of the strap with your opposite hand. Put your hand firmly on the ground. And then just kind of lean into it, just kind of rock into it. So the band is applying a posterior force to your radius and ulna and kind of giving it a little bit of a glide as you're rocking into it. You don't need to force anything, you don't need to push into pain or anything, you're just kind of gently letting the force of the band and your body weight rocking that motion do the work, okay? So I'm using a flexible band, but you can also use like a belt, whatever you really have around the house to do the motion. You could also try just using your opposite hand to block the motion. So if you put your hand on a stable surface, block the motion with your other hand and just kind of rock into it. You might be able to do that too. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. After you do the mobilization, then you should definitely stretch to kind of reinforce any gains that you made in mobility. So you're going to come back into a stretch and hold that stretch. Okay, so you can do mobility movements every day, a couple times a day. You're not pushing into pain. You're not forcing anything. You're just gentle motions and trying to gradually gain motion over time. It's something that will take probably several weeks, depending on how big of an issue you have. If you do have a restriction, if you don't really have a restriction, it's still not a bad idea to do some of this stuff like before you do some of the exercises or events. Check out my other videos to improve your mobility for the other events.